So, for the last 8 years, I have worked to think about child poverty in northern Manhattan. And so, that work was really at this nonprofit up here. And when the pandemic hit, what we saw is that our mothers were calling us with some version of, I have no money, I have no formula, I have no diapers, and I don't know what to do. And I think in that moment, what we started to really realize is, up to that point, we had done a lot of education, a lot of community building. And in those moments, in those early days of COVID, we recognized that we had to do something really differently because we could not respond fast enough in our current model to meet the needs of these mothers. And so cash was the obvious answer because it's a universal, right, flexible form of income. And so we figured out how to get cash in the mother's hands. So we gave the moms cash 4 times over the course of those early days of the pandemic. And then we listened. And when they came back, they started to tell us things like, well, I used the money to keep Zoom on for my kids because the internet bill needed to be paid for them to go to school. Another one said to us, I'll never forget, like, my mother is my lifeline, and she lives really far away. And so being able to keep that cell phone on was the way I kept my sanity during those locked-in early days. And of course, they all used it for things like diapers and food and baby formula.
Because how much money were we talking in the beginning?
We would give them $500 a month. And so I think that's when my wheels started turning of, there's something here of a scalable model that listens to the mother and is efficient and effective and provides the dignity that is so lacking in so many of our social safety net programs.
Where does the funding come from?
The funding comes from the Monarch Foundation, which is fully funded by my husband and myself at the moment.
So again, just to reiterate, you have mothers that will receive up to $1,000 a month.
Yes.
For 3 years. New mothers, expecting mothers.
Yeah.
How crucial has this been for them?
I think for many of them, they will say it's everything, right? I think it is summed up by mothers will say, I'm able to breathe. And just as a human being, I think of what that statement encompasses. It also just means that they aren't worried about dinner. George Orwell, a long time ago wrote that poverty annihilates the future. And I think we see that, right? It's so true that if all you can focus on is dinner because you don't know where that's coming from, it's really hard to then think through bedtime routine and a change in career and how you stabilize your housing situation. And so I think what fundamentally this money does is it gives them a little bit of breathing space to step back and think about how to be the best mother they can be and what their dreams are for themselves and for their baby.
People will hear $1,000, free money. How do you ensure that it goes to mothers who will use it for the right purpose?
Fundamentally, our program is based on trust and the dignity of human beings. And at the end of the day, I'm a mother. And I think of, as a society, we talk about, a mother's fierce love for her children and that she would do anything. And then we have a whole set of social safety net programs that absolutely do not trust her. And at the end of the day, as a mother, I know she's going to make the right decisions for her babies, and I trust that. And so my money's on her every day.
Do you worry that giving someone free money for 3 years might stunt their growth in terms of having a plan to get out of that? And what happens after they've gotten accustomed to having $1,000 a month for 3 years?
I think the data has shown so far from the early pilots in places like Stockton and Jackson that when folks receive unrestricted cash, they tend to actually work longer and are able to find employment at twice the rates as non-recipients of that cash. And so I think, it comes back to this idea that if people have a little bit of time to think about what the future looks like, no one wants to be poor. And so when you have a little bit of breathing space, you're able to take that money and think about what that future really does look like. Because those first 1,000 days of life are so, so critical for the baby's brain. We know that the baby's brain is doubling in size. By the time they're 3 years old, it's at 80% of its adult capacity. So we're really laying the foundation for the rest of their life. And there's a lot of research out there that I had seen that as a practitioner working with our families in northern Manhattan, I did not see put into practice around the academics know, right? Whether it's the Harvard Center on the Developing Child or Nadine Burke-Harris in California, that these early days, it's like the foundation of a house. And if that basement wall is cracked or crooked or not set properly, it doesn't matter what tile we put on the second floor bathroom.
Money will help.
Yes.
It will help to provide the things that someone needs to thrive.
Yeah.
It will provide the housing, it could provide the food. But
Yeah.
how much of that development that you're talking about is also someone, reading to a baby and making
Yeah.
sure that they are getting stimulation?
Yeah. Well, I think it's always both, for sure. But I think in what we are seeing over and over again is there's so many factors that money really helps. It helps with housing stability. It helps with food. It helps in terms of decreasing the stress level of a household so that the mother has the ability to get to a bedtime routine. And I always think if we can get to a bedtime routine, like that's gold, because that means that a whole bunch of other things have gone well. And it means that the mother has enough time and capacity in her brain to think about reading a book to a baby, putting in warm pajamas, and snuggling. And if we can get that routinized, then you have a good night of sleep. And that starts a whole new other cycle. And so there's certainly education that goes along with all of this, but fundamentally, unrestricted cash, trusting the mother, is the most efficient, the effective, and the most dignity-filled of all these things. So my husband and I are both Wharton finance majors. And at the end of the day, as philanthropists, return on investment matters. We could use our money in a lot of different places. And why we're using it here is because we believe this has the best chance for impact on a child's life. And I think fundamentally, cash is a universal answer to individual problems. And so we cut out all the bureaucracy, all the middlemen, and we go right to the mother who knows more than anyone else in the whole world what that baby needs today.
Do you almost feel obligated, in a sense? We were talking about your upbringing, your humble beginnings, and you've done well. You and your husband have done well for yourself. But what part of it is almost an obligation as a mother, as someone who's done well financially for themselves, to do even more? Because some could say, oh, well, I pay a lot in taxes. That's my giving back.
Yes.
But you and your husband said, what more can we do? Why?
I feel very compelled to give more. So I grew up in a little town on the Ohio-West Virginia border, 325 people. My family had been in that county for 200 years. And my mom, I come from a long line of coal miners and factory workers, and my mom was a first grade teacher. And I will say that she would come home and she knew when a kid had on 2 sweatshirts that wasn't because it was interesting or fashionable, it was because they didn't have a winter coat. And she understood that family was not going to have a turkey. And so, I think I grew up watching role models of people who understood how to give back whatever they had and how to share whatever they had with a lot of dignity, because she would never go give the winter coat. We would wait till they were gone, and a secret bag would be left on a front step.
Wow, your mother would do that.
Yes, and so I saw that, and I think this notion of trusting people and recognizing that we all need a hand up sometime, and that this world is a better world when we all help each other and learn that basic lesson we should have all learned in kindergarten, to share. I think my parents modeled that every day.
And now you're modeling that
Well,
to
I'm
the
trying.
world.